In this video, I play 2-5 cash at the win in Las Vegas, Nevada against Adam22. We play some nice hands together in a very action-packed session. The first hand of the session is versus our man Adam. He raises to $20 on the button. I'm in the small blind with ace-5 suited and I 3-bet to $65. Adam makes a call and the flop comes king 8-7, 1 diamond. This is a pretty good flop for our range. I'm going to size up a bit here and bet $75. Adam makes a call and the turn is a jack of diamonds. With the nut flush draw now, I could certainly bet big here and set up for a jam on the river, but I don't think I get a lot of his hands to fold. And I would hate to bet here and get raised off of my equity. For this reason, I check and Adam checks back. The river is 8 of clubs. This is not a great card for us to bluff as Adam can have some 8x. And if he has a king or a jack or any medium type pair hand, he might have a hard time folding these. I shut down and check and Adam checks back. He shows ace queen of spades for a flopped nut flush draw and turned gut shot. We both had pretty big draws and I'm glad this pot didn't get too big.
Oh yeah, I wasn't getting to fold that.
Yeah, I don't know. So who is the flop? The fucking raise the turn?
Oh, that was good.
Let's see if I can get Adam back in this next hand as there is an early position limit for $5 and Adam raises to $45 in the hijack. I have pocket kings and we 3-bet to 130 in the cutoff. Action folds back around to Adam and he makes a call. The flop comes as amazing as we could hope for. King 7-7. We flop a boat. Adam checks to me and I bet small, $35 into about $265. Adam makes a call and the turn is a 10 of diamonds. This time when he checks, I bet $225. I think if there wasn't a flush draw on board, I could certainly go smaller. Maybe we could go smaller no matter what as Adam makes the fold.
I mean...
Soon after this hand, Adam leaves to join 5-10.
Adam heading to 5-10. Oh shit, oh shit.
Way better than the first session.
In the next hand, I have pocket 8s and raise to $15 under the gun. The hijack and the cutoff make the call. The flop comes 8-5-4, 2 spades. I flop top set in a multi-way pot. I start off by checking and the hijack bets $25. The cutoff calls and we are certainly going to put in a raise here. I make it $125. This time just the cutoff makes a call. The turn is the 6 of hearts. This is really not a great card as any 7 now makes a straight. I check and my opponent bets 175 into about 320. I just make the call and the river comes the queen of hearts. I check once again and this time my opponent bets $300 into about 675, so about half pot. For this price, I am certainly not folding.
My hand's too good to fold.
I aggressively put a $500 chip in the pot for a call, and my opponent shows the bad news, 7-5 of hearts for a straight. In the next hand, I have pocket kings in the cutoff, and the under the gun player raises to $20. There is an early position call, and we 3-bet to $85. The big blind cold calls our 3-bet, and the under the gun and other early position player make the call. We are going 4 ways to a flop that of course comes ace high, ace 5-3. The big blind is first to act and decides to lead for $200. Action folds back around to me and this is a very easy fold. This player basically has no bluffs leading multi-way into us and we are just going to see him have an ace here basically all the time. Especially being that the player is short stacked with about $600 to start. No one likes to see an ace on the flop when they have kings, but it happens. In the next hand there is an under the gun straddle on and we raise ace jack off under the gun 2 to $30. The cutoff and the straddle both make the call. The flop comes queen 10-7. It's a pretty good flop for our range and we have a gut shot to the nuts, so I bet $40 into about 90. The button ends up raising to 120 and the under the gun player folds. For this size, I don't mind peeling 1 and seeing if we can bink the turn. I make the call and the turn comes the 8 of clubs. This is no help for us. I check, my opponent bets $200 this time. If we were deeper here, I could certainly maybe get creative and turn my hand into a bluff, representing jack 9 of course, but we are too short, so I just make the fold. In the next hand, we have 10-9 off on the button. The hijack raises to $15. Typically, this should just be a fold, but the hijack has been playing very loose and giving their money away. I want to play hands with them, and being in position with 2 connected cards, I say let's see a flop. The small blind and the big blind both make the call, and we see a flop indeed as it comes jack 8-7. We flop the nut straight, and action checks to us. I bet $40 into about 60. Just the hijack, who is the very loose player we described, makes a call. The turn is a 4 of spades. My opponent checks once again, this time I bet pot, 140. Could have even overbet here, but this is fine as my opponent makes a call. The river is the 3 of clubs. My opponent checks, and they have about $370 left. Betting big, like 200, or betting pot, or going all in, are basically all the same thing here. So I go for max value and put my opponent all in. They think it over for not too long, and eventually make the call. We will win this over $1,000 pot and send my opponent walking. In the next hand, we are in the small blind with Jack 9 of diamonds. There is an early position raise to $20. The low jack calls, and so does the cutoff. I make the call in the small blind, and the flop comes pretty beautiful. 8-7-3, all diamonds. We flop a flush with a gut shot to the straight flush. Action checks around to the cutoff, who bets $75, which is about pot. I could raise here, but I think this would just look too strong, so I just make the call. Besides, we are generally not going to be raising much versus a pot-sized bet. The turn comes the Jack of spades. I check once again, and my opponent checks back this time. The river comes the deuce of spades. I debate what to do here for quite some time. This seems like a situation where my opponent has a naked diamond, like the ace of diamonds or king of diamonds. In this case, I want to give them a chance to bluff, so I check. They end up checking back and showing ace 3 with the ace of diamonds. Maybe if they did not have a pair, they would go for the bluff. Maybe a block bet would have worked pretty well here as well. We will win this one with our flopped flush. In the next hand, the button straddle is on for $10. There is an early position limp, and we raise with Jack 8 of hearts to $50 in the low jack. The button and the limper make the call. The flop comes ace 9-7. With a gut shot and a range advantage, I put in a C bet here for $40. We get the main player we were concerned with here to fold the button, and the early position player makes a call. The turn is a queen of spades. This really changes nothing, but when my opponent limp calls pre, their hand should be pretty weak. For this reason, I am going to continue with my bluff, and I bet 160 into about 230. My opponent once again makes the call, and the river comes the 4 clubs. My opponent checks, and we only have one option at this point, and that is to put my opponent all in for $463 to be exact. We know the exact amount because after taking some time, we hear this.
I think I'm probably beat, but I think I have to call all at the same time.
Do what you want.
Yeah.
You're good.
My opponent calls with an ace, ace 5 off, and we learn a hard lesson in bluffing people that don't fold. Just don't do it. In the next hand, I have ace queen off, and there is an under the gun limp for $5. Under the gun 1 raises to $25, and we call under the gun 2. Action folds back around to the under the gun limper, who folds, and the flop comes queen 10-10. My opponent starts off by betting $30 into about 55. With top pair, top kicker here, we are obviously going nowhere. We make the call. The turn comes the 3 of clubs. This time my opponent bets $40 into about 115. This is a pretty small sizing, so maybe there is some consideration here for a raise. But being my opponent is under the gun 1 and raised preflop, we should know their range should be pretty strong. For this reason, I decide to just call. The river is a 10 of diamonds. This time, my opponent checks. We now have a full house, and if we bet and get check raised here, it would be ugly, but we certainly cannot check this back. I bet 175 into about 200. My opponent thinks it over and finally makes a call. We likely had the best hand all the way to the river. Maybe they had something like pocket jacks. Speaking of pocket jacks, this is what we have in the next hand when there is a button straddle on for $10. There are several limps, and we raise to $70 in the small blind. Action folds around to the button, who 3 bets to $250. This is the same player we just beat with ace queen, and they only have about $550 to start. While they are generally tight, the straddle on in this hand makes it so they only have about 50 big blinds. For this amount, we put them all in for about $550 total. They make the call, and the flop comes king, king, 5, 2 spades. The turn is the 5 of spades, and the river is a 9 of hearts. I apprehensively show my hand, not really knowing what to expect. I mean, my opponent can certainly have ace king here, or of course queens plus, but when I show, my opponent does not show, and we end up being good. While leaving, my opponent will say he made the right call pre, which I'm guessing can only mean he had ace queen. Either way, we are happy to win this over $1,000 pot. In the next hand, I pick up pocket jacks again. This time there is an under the gun straddle on for $10 and 2 limps. We raise to $40 on the button, and just the hijack makes a call. The flop comes king 6 3 rainbow. My opponent checks, and with an over to my pocket jacks, I check this one back. The turn is the 4 of clubs. This time my opponent bets $50 into about 60. Not going anywhere, I make the call. The river comes the 8 of clubs. A backdoor flush gets there, but otherwise this card changes nothing. This time my opponent checks. I'm happy to check back, and my opponent shows pocket 5s. So they picked up an open-ended straight draw on the turn and gave up on the river. Or maybe they thought they were betting for value, not sure. In the next hand, I have king 7 of diamonds, and the under the gun straddle is on for $10 again. There is an early position limp, and we raise in the hijack to $50. This is a bit loose, but this wasn't too tough of a game, so I think it's fine. The button and the early position limper make the call. The flop comes 7-6-3. Action checks to me, and with top pair here, I'm going to bet. I make it $65. The button and the early position player make the call. The turn is a 10 of hearts. This time, when action checks to me, I want to control the pot a bit, and I check. The button bets 215 into about 345. The early position player ends up calling. My one pair hand is now looking pretty weak, so I make the fold. The river comes the 4 of clubs, and action ends up going check, check. We end up seeing that the button had 10-9 of clubs for a flopped gut shot and turned top pair. And we will see off camera that the early position player had ace 7 of clubs. Glad we could get out of that one without paying more. In the last hand of the night, I have ace king off, and there is a $10 straddle on under the gun. There is one early position limp, and I raise to $45 in the hijack. The limper makes a call, and the flop comes 9 deuce deuce. Action checks to me, and I'm going to just put in a small range bet here for $30. My opponent makes a call, and the turn is glorious. The king of clubs. My opponent checks again, and this time I size up to 130. To my pleasant surprise, my opponent check raises me to $400. They only have about $300 left behind at this point, so I could go all in, or I could just call. In case they are going crazy and actually have a bluff here, I decide to just call. The river comes the 3 of hearts. This is a great card that changes nothing, and my opponent goes all in for about $300. I quickly make the call, and my opponent shows king queen off for a worse top pair.
No, don't face it up. Oh my god.
Betting the flop in this hand set us up for a nice final pot of over $1,500. Time to admire my stack and cash out. Alright guys, pretty wild session. We were in this one for about 2,700, cash out for 29.10. That's about a $300 profit. So always happy to profit, even though it wasn't a huge profit. Every little bit counts. And if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe, let me know what you thought of my play, and thanks for watching. Peace!
No, don't face it up. Oh my god.